For many people, unemployment, in fact, I think for all people, can be a little frustrating, a little demotivating. It's not comfortable to be unemployed for many of us. I know for myself, it was something I hadn't experienced before. And I really needed to kind of figure out what the steps I needed to take to find that next job. I didn't want to go on to a job board immediately and start applying for everything under the sun because I might have found an awesome job or I might have fell into a bad situation. I wanted to have a plan. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about kind of how we get a plan together, how we deal with the loss of our past job, and kind of how we move forward. So with COVID, you may have noticed that, a lot of employers weren't hiring for the beginning. There weren't a lot of jobs and there weren't as many opportunities. Right now, there are a ton of opportunities. And I'm not saying that these are all in your line of work for the pay that you want or in your area. But on MinnesotaWorks.net, which is the state's job board, there are more jobs posted today than I believe I've seen in my entire career with the state. And I've been working with the state for the past 10, 12 years. There's the biggest difference between resumes posted from job seekers and jobs posted from employers. There's over 100,000 jobs currently posted on MinnesotaWorks.net. And employers are being more flexible than I've ever seen as far as scheduling. There's more work from home opportunities than there were in the past. I always got to be a little bit careful with that. That's never exactly what it sounds like. In many cases, there is a training in period and there's, a process. Every employer is different, but there are more work from home jobs than I've ever seen. So if this is your first time looking for work in a while, it has changed a little bit. And there are jobs out there, but that does not mean it's easy. So let's talk about that first step. And that first step is managing the stress of job loss. Some of you may have been dealing with this throughout the pandemic. Some of you may be dealing with it today for the first time. But it all has to do with a little bit of loss of identity. If you think about it, the first question someone asks you is, what's your name? The second question they often ask is, what do you do for a living? When you're unemployed, that can be a difficult question to answer. I know it was for me. Prior to working with the state, I was a manager of a computer training center for about 13 years. And it was fun. I mean, people would say, what do you do for a living? I said, I teach people how to use computers. I love my job. I get to help people every day. And then when I lost that job, that question brought up a whole bunch of emotions because I no longer had that. There was a sense of loss, a sense of identity that was lost when I no longer had that job. It's really important to be prepared for that question, especially around the holidays, because you may be comfortable in in group settings, and you may be meeting people more than you have in the past several months, and people are going to want to know what you've been up to. That's a real opportunity for networking. If you're not prepared for it, you kind of default to the emotional side of it. And you tell people about what you're feeling about that job loss and how during the holidays it's tough. And I get it. That's a absolute, there's no right or wrong on that. However, how you respond to that can really determine whether that conversation leads to new opportunities. Okay. So what I'm going to show you is my favorite slide, I think, in the entire 6-week course of creative job search. And this is the emotional roller coaster of job searching. And at least in my case, this was very, very true. In a lot of our situations, we may have kind of seen the writing on the wall. And in some cases, maybe the sales were down, or the company wasn't doing great, or a relationship was souring between you and your manager. And you get that layoff notice or whatever, and immediately you're going to be kind of feeling that, oh my gosh, what do I do now? And then there's in many cases just a natural release of, boy, that was really stressful the last few months. I just didn't get along with my manager, or I was just waiting for that that notice, and there's this relief of, I don't have to deal with that on a daily basis. And then, of course, the first bills come in, or the reality of it happens, and you go through this emotional roller coaster. Some people will jump right into a next job. I'm not saying that's not possible. You could jump into your dream job the next week, and be prepared for things as they happen. However, be also prepared that you're going to see a lot of fits and starts. You're going to have a lot of times in which it sounds like, oh my goodness, this job is exactly what I was looking for, and then they pull the job, or they hire someone else, or the interview went fantastic and you were absolutely positive they were going to offer the job, and they didn't. So the key here is, no matter what you're feeling, the ups and downs, when you're talking to people, when you're networking, you need to keep it at this level. Not everything is great in the world and everything's wonderful, but absolutely not maybe what you're feeling in that, oh gosh, this is horrible. How am I gonna do this? The reason is, people respond well at this level. So if you're prepared for those questions, such as, what do you do for a living? Instead of saying, well, I had been doing this, I really liked my job, but I just don't know what I'm going to do now. You respond with, for the last 13 years, I had been doing computer training for people. Currently, I'm looking at opportunities as working with the state. I'm really looking to get into state work. So I've been applying for a few jobs there. I'm also looking at possibly a career in corrections. They asked you a question. You gave them a 10-second answer. You didn't give them your life story, but you gave them connection points. And that's the key. People can't help you unless you give them something to connect with. I'm looking for work is not a connection point, because they don't know what kind of work or why they should connect you to their network. Notice what I said there. I've been working for the past 13 years in computer training. I'm looking to get in with the state, or possibly in with corrections. There's 3 connection points there. One, the experience, and the 2 other ones where I want to apply that experience. Now, and you could tell 20 people this and get nothing, but if one of those 20 people knows someone who works in corrections or has a background in computer training, they're going to engage. You're not boring people. You're not asking them to do anything for you. You're giving them information and telling them what you're doing, so that if they can help, they will. And generally, people do want to help. I've noticed that. If you give people information and tell them what your needs are, you don't have to say, I need your help. They will naturally want to do it if they can find connections. So just something to think about. And by the way, if you do have any questions, we will be pausing every few slides, or Sheila will just turn on her camera and she will let me know that there are some questions. But feel free at any time to enter information into the chat box. All right. Just off the heck, for the heck of it, you don't have to use these exact terms, but in the chat box, just tell me where you are currently on the, if you're comfortable, on the roller coaster. Or do you see yourself at any of these points? Do any of these strike a chord and like, well, boy, I'm getting my first leads, or I found a great opening, or maybe leads didn't pan out. I'll take a quick look in the chat box to see if there's anything there. Last third of the charts, okay. Way longer than expected. Yeah, I can see that. Mobilizing resources. Taking longer than expected. Oh, a lot of good answers here. Starting to mobilize resources. And by the way, this is a great first step. We're going to give you lots of information, and the links I'm going to be giving you and some of the will be in the follow-up material. So you don't have to worry about jumping onto a website and bookmarking the links I'm going to be sending you. You'll get that in tomorrow's follow-up. Sadness, and I get it. It's unfortunate, but sadness for many of us is part of it. It's loss. It really is. But be aware that there are opportunities, there are resources, there are supports out there to help you in your job search. All right, we're going to move on.
Just before you move on, Art, there's just a little conversation when you made some opening comments and people commenting about employers being more flexible with someone with an older background, they're struggling with that, or maybe someone who has skills that are really great, but not really related to the industry that they were applying for the job. Do you want to comment
Okay.
on that?
Sure. We'll be dealing with connecting transferable skills here in a couple slides, but I do want to comment a little bit about what I am seeing as far as flexibility of schedules. Now, this does not speak to all employers, but I have seen one of the real, I don't want to say employers are desperate. I'm just saying that employers are really open to things they weren't open to in the past. And what I'm seeing more than ever in my area, and I live a little north of Duluth, is if you listen to the radio, the broadcast radio, at least half of the ads now are for employers looking to hire people. I've never seen that level of employers engaging through ads. And what I'm hearing is we will be as flexible as possible, shifts up to 2 hours. They're actually looking to find people who may have retired and are looking for that retirement career, or people who have a daycare schedule that needs to be extremely flexible around, when their kids are at school. Again, not all employers are willing to do this. My daughter had applied for a job, and at wages I have never seen. It was an entry level job at a big box store, and it was $22 an hour. And this is not the Twin Cities. This is in my area. But their thing was they weren't as flexible with schedules. So where they competed was they competed at a higher price. So you're going to see that some employers will be offering a lot more than they used to, but they're not going to be as flexible. Other employers that are offering more standard wages are going to increase their flexibility. She needed the flexibility, so she took a job at a lower cost or lower wage that provided her the flexibility she needed. So taking a look, turn on the radio. I mean, look at different spots. Employers are going all over the place. They're on social media. They're on Minnesota Works. They're on Indeed. They're on Craigslist. They're all over the place. But don't discount networking, talking to people. You'll get the real deal by talking to people. The key is, though, I have found if you're interested in a company, you want to find more about that company, and you know someone who works there, kind of set the stage. Don't say, well, what's it like working there? Because generally people would rather stay home if they could. In many cases, not everybody, but we go to work because we're paid in many cases. So there's going to be that natural reluctance. So if you don't kind of frame it as, what can help me? How can I understand more? They may go in a direction that doesn't help you a lot. I hate to say negative direction, but they may talk about things that they don't like about their work. So the only question I always ask is, what's the best thing about working for your company? And that usually helps steer the conversation towards things you can use. And you can ask, are there sign-on bonuses? Are there, how flexible are they? One of the big ones, I helped someone get a job a few years ago. And the biggest thing he talked about was, I got to go to my daughter's Christmas program. At my previous job, I could never do that. This job was a little bit less pay, but the flexibility more than compensates for that. So it's really key to look at the full package. People who have worked in contract work really have a hard time with this. I've done contract work. And if you are self-employed through contract work or some way tied to a company, your wage is going to be quite a bit more than you normally would get. And the reason is they don't take taxes out of it. You're self-employed. They don't take benefit fringe, what they call, out of that. So for many people who have been used to getting a very high rate of pay, they don't really see the full picture. And so look at the benefits, look at what that would be when you take the taxes out of your previous job to compare apples to apples. And then ask, what else do you need? Benefits are a huge part of it. Time off, sick leave. Some areas have specific sick leave initiatives. I know the city of Duluth has one that employers are having to adapt to. So there's a lot changed. The more information you have, the better. There is a website out there called Glassdoor. I'll include that in the links I send out, that will allow you to get more information about an employer than some of the other websites. They do encourage people to share information about the hiring process, about wages, starting wages, a lot of different things. But don't be focused solely on the starting wage, because that doesn't tell the whole picture about what a company has to offer. They all compete at different levels. All right, and then we'll talk about the transferring to new jobs with your old skills here in just a few minutes. The key to this emotional roller coaster, this one right here, I can't control anything about anyone's emotion or their previous connection to an employer. You may be at a stage that, hey, I forgive them. I understand that they had to make a tough financial decision, but we all need to move to this stage. Maybe not necessarily forgiveness, but the move on part. And the reason for that is people who don't move on from the negativity of how they left their last job generally carry that into their job search. And it's really hard to separate. It really is, because you're asked all sorts of questions that almost give you, they're almost asking you to talk about it. They'll say, why did you leave your last job? Or tell me about a difficult situation you had with your boss. If you're not prepared for that, if you haven't moved on from that situation, it now can impact your next opportunity. Doesn't mean you have to agree with it. Doesn't mean you have to forgive it. It just means that you don't need to have it negatively affect your next opportunity. And that's why they ask those questions, by the way. They want to see how professional you are. When you have the opportunity to maybe throw someone under the bus, do you do it? And the reason that's important is we change jobs every 3 to 5 years. I don't want to do that, but generally we switch jobs every 3 to 5 years. And an employer can see that if someone talks poorly about their previous job, 3 to 5 years, they're going to be speaking poorly about me, potentially. Okay. So the idea is maybe not that it was right or wrong what happened. It's just that it doesn't help you to vent about it. So we all need to have that safe outlet. The key is that safe outlet should be a one-to-one conversation with someone you really trust. Someone that maybe you can, pour your heart out to. The mistake a lot of people make is they make that safe outlet social media. When you put it on social media, you really infect your entire network. We find jobs through people we know, like, and trust. We generally do social media with people we know, like, and trust. If we're putting that negativity out there on social media, we infect that entire network at the same time. So it doesn't really help to go on and vent. And I'm not saying people do this all the time, but I do see it occasionally. And it really lessens the willingness for people to engage. They're not going to reach out. They may say, oh, that's horrible. I feel so bad for you. But they don't necessarily want to put their professional reputation on the line by making an introduction to another employer that they know, like, and trust. And that's what networking is connecting, someone who has a need with someone who has an opportunity. But you have to know, like, and trust both of those entities to put yourself in the middle of it. All right. So just not to belabor a point, but it's a choice we have to make, and sometimes it's a difficult, hard thing to do. But we really have to feel that, yes, this happened. I'm dealing with it, but what am I going to do about it? And some days are better than others. I get it. Some days it's just that's why we had that roller coaster of some days you're just having a bad day. But every day is a new day with new opportunities. If you're trying the same thing over and over again, try something new. Go to a networking group, even if it's online. There are networking groups online. Take a new class. Try to, enhance your skill set. There's a lot of free opportunities now, more than ever, really, to take online classes. There are some great free ones. I always do that. If I have some downtime, I'll go on and think, what new can I learn today? Because if I learn something new, I have something new to offer. So I'm not giving an employer the same exact information. I have something new. Maybe I don't have work experience in it, but I have new training. And that's the second best thing to experience is, education or training. I'll give a couple links for that. One of the ones I really like looking into, simply because it transfers to so many different types of jobs, is just basic computer skills. So there's a great website called gcflearnfree.org. It's Goodwill Community Foundation, and you can learn how to use Word or Excel or social media or a host of digital online and computer programs and platforms. You're doing something right now to increase your marketability. You're engaging in an online webinar. I haven't been to more meetings. I've been to more meetings in the last year and a half online than I have in my entire career. And I've been doing online meetings since 2007, I believe. I've been doing online training since 2008. This is the new way of doing things. And even when we bounce back, even when things become more to where they were before, this is not leaving. This will still be part. Employers and job seekers have found that, hey, this can really help. It allows me to potentially work from home. It saves an employer a lot of money. We figured out the technology, and you're figuring it out by just engaging here. That's a marketable skill set. Knowledge of online platforms. You can say you've attended many online trainings and understand how to interact in those platforms. All right. So just some of the ways to stay positive, talking with others, and again, not venting, talking with others, networking, having a purpose, support groups or job clubs, going out for a walk. For me, especially on a sunny day, even though we only had 8 below in my area, and not 13 below like Sheila, but I have a treadmill too, and I get on that every single day. And it's really hard to maintain a negative attitude when you get those endorphins going and you get your heart pumping a little bit. So exercise is a huge part. And by the way, I said walking. This is not anything where you have to do extreme anything. Walking is exercise, and it really does improve your mood. Some people will find benefit in counseling. I know a lot of people who just like putting a really nice little saying on their screensaver above their monitor. That's a really cool thing you can do with these online interviews, is you can even put positive self affirmations to the right of your monitor, that whatever really speaks to you. You can also put notes about the employer. There are some benefits to online interviews. Not all interviews are online. A lot of people think that that's all that's being done. We still do have in-person interviewing, so be aware of that. And then volunteering. If you're not working and it becomes long-term, the easiest way to show an employer what you've been doing while you've been unemployed is to say, I've been working. I haven't been paid to do it, but I have been engaging. I'm still interested in the concept of work. I'm still in the game. I'm still getting up every morning. I'm still going out there. The one thing I would mention about volunteer work is treat it like a real job. I've had a lot of volunteers work under me over the years. I have fired volunteers. And I don't mean to be mean by that, but when you have a volunteer, the idea is they're going to add value. Certainly, you're going to give them training as an employer. You're going to add value for them, but you expect them to show up. And in some instances, people will treat volunteering as just I'll do it when I can or when I feel like it. That's not going to benefit you a lot in the job search, because you lose out on that reference potentially. You lose out on the skill sets you could have been developing. And also, the best way to network is on the job. I know a lot of people who have turned volunteer jobs into full-time work. It can happen. So think of it as a extended interview. In fact, I had one individual I was working with who really, really wanted to work at a specific hospital in my area and could not get an interview. It was really affecting her well-being, because she just felt she was, called basically to work at this place. And what she eventually ended up doing is we set up a volunteer opportunity. Once they saw her in person and her attitude and what she could bring, within a month she was hired into the job she originally wanted. That's a long-term strategy, and of course, if you can get paid for your work, get paid for your work. But if you're struggling to find a paid job, consider volunteering in something that would benefit you in going forward in your career. All right, some things to think about. We've got ton of assessments here. We also have them on careerforcemn.com. We have a bunch of assessments right on the online tools that I'll show you here in a minute. But we also have links that I'll be sending everyone here. And it's really a bit overwhelming. So don't try to fully, understand and go through each of these. Think about it as, what can I accomplish in a day? What's a good goal for me to do? One of the ones I like is ONET, ONET Online. That's a really good one. But they all have their unique little niches. In many cases, you're going to see some repetition, but each one kind of specializes in a certain aspect. And a lot of them will allow you to pull skill sets from the one line of work and make the case that they're relevant to that next line of work. The newest tool we have on careerforcemn.com is a skills matcher, but there are various skills matchers throughout the internet. And here are quite a few of them that I've given you links for. Now, if you do find that you have a big gap in skills, and I'm going to go back to just one I use quite a bit because it's an easy one to overcome. Some people may have worked in an organization in which they did all the stuff they needed to do to get this next job, but they didn't have the exposure to maybe Excel or Teams or Outlook because they use different platforms, or they just didn't use those types of programs. And that's really tough because it's a required skill possibly on that job listing in which you are applying to. If you don't have it on the resume or in the application someplace, if those words aren't there, you may be filtered out. So identify skills gaps and do your best to fill those skills gaps. Now, it's really hard to do that with paid employment. How can you get experience if you don't have the opportunity? And that's where the online training comes in. And the example I gave was Goodwill Community Foundation's Excel training. I've used that for, I think 20 years. I've been recommending that. It's still something I personally go on to, and I teach Excel to kind of freshen my skills. And it's absolutely free, and there's no ads, and there's no malware or any of that stuff. And then make the move or not. Sometimes we have to invest in our career. I'll give you an example of I used to teach a maintenance custodial class, and many people had experience. I have maintenance custodial experience, and that allows you to have a lateral career. You can go from what you've done and the skills you've developed during that time will allow you to do something similar at that next employer, possibly. If you're looking at career advancement, think about what else can you offer. So one of the things we had done in maintenance custodial is we had offered a boiler's license certificate program. It's called a special engineer's license. And we did a pool operator's license. The reason being, maintenance custodial can be the same for 20 different organizations. Maybe 5 of those organizations also need you to have a boiler's license, and they're going to pay you more for it. That is something that you could spend, I think it's $100. You could study for a couple weeks. You could go to the Department of Labor website, find a testing location, invest in your career, and potentially do that. There's a lot of free stuff out there, but there are some somewhat affordable short-term options. If you're looking to get that funded, there's a potential to connect with a dislocated worker counselor within the career force system. I'll be giving information on that also. And the idea is there's an eligibility requirement. If you've lost a job through no fault of your own, there are short-term training dollars potentially available. I'd recommend, if you're at all interested in that, you at least have a conversation with your local dislocated worker counselor. They can't pay for a 4-year degree, but they can pay for, in some cases, if it benefits your career, if it can give you new opportunities, some short-term trainings. For myself, one of the toughest ones I ran into was I'm self-taught on computers. And it wasn't that I didn't have the skills, it's that I had no proof of that. So what I did was I went to the Twin Cities. I drove down one day and I took a Microsoft Office Specialist certification. And that did cost me, I think, $85. But it doesn't expire. For the rest of my life, I'm a Microsoft Office certified trainer. And I can put that on my resume, and it validates a skill set. And it was a short-term investment in my career that's been paying dividends for the last 15 years. But again, that's first identifying those skill gaps. So I'm going to quickly go through some of the online tools. On CareerForce MN itself, on the online tools tab, there are a few assessments. There's an interest assessment, and that's a real good starter. Find out where you're at. You know, what am I interested in doing? What kind of careers benefit for people with those interests? You can take a skills assessment in and of itself. There's a lot of those out there. We also have some additional things. We have a list of in-demand jobs now. If you're looking for maybe those highest demand jobs, there's an enormous amount of information about what experience is needed, what education is needed, who's hiring. It'll drill down to actual jobs. So there's an enormous amount of information on our website alone, careerforcemn.com. So take a look at that. Another one that I really like is My Skills, My Future. This will really give you, you talk about, you know, a job you've had, and then they're going to find careers with similar skill needs. And then you can kind of figure out where the skills gaps are and how to fill those skills gaps. It really is a systematic process. I mean, like I said before, you could apply for a job tomorrow and get it with no research whatsoever. But that's really rolling the dice. You really should think about, while you're applying for jobs, what would I be happy doing? You know, what am I good at? What do I like doing? Which employers require that or need that experience? And you're probably going to be happier in those jobs. It just takes a little bit more research. And employers, by the way, are much more likely to engage with someone who comes with facts, comes with a reason. The reason I applied here, the reason I want to work here is, I really like this aspect of the job. I've been happy doing it for the last 10 years. I see that this is a big part of what you do here. 2, I've heard really good things from my network. You're known as the leader in safety in this area. You know, all that stuff, the networking, the research, the self-examination of your skill set. It all leads for you making the best possible case to an employer for why they should hire you. All right, another website that's out there, and this is from Indeed itself, my umbrella organization. That is the Job Skills Transfer Assessment Tool. Now, this one's a little more involved. It's going to take a little bit more playing around with, but it really has an enormous amount of information for you to look at and try, and it'll really kind of, you can drill down to what a position may pay in a certain area. You know, a lot of people who move from the Twin Cities to my area are shocked at how the price, because the cost of living isn't as expensive up here. And I would imagine in Sheila's area, it could be even different. So it's really important to understand what to expect from an employer in a regional area, because they do often ask on the application, you know, what's the wage range? I don't like saying negotiable myself. I like giving them an idea. You know, based on my research and my experience, here's where I would see myself. It's not going to lock you into anything. You can price yourself out of certain jobs, but you know, do the research, take the time. It's all about, for me, quantity, not quantity, when it goes to applying for jobs. That doesn't mean you wait for the absolute perfect job, because they maybe don't exist. But instead of applying for every possible job you see, spend some time on figuring out what jobs will meet your needs, you would be happy with, and you would be willing to do. And there are tools out there for that. All right, before we get into our SMART goals, Sheila, are there any questions we need to get to?
Just a couple, and then I just wanted to make a comment. There's a lot of questions about dislocated worker program and who to connect with. And as I stated in the chat, if you call your local CareerForce location and ask to speak with a dislocated worker representative, they will get you connected with somebody in that program. And it's worthwhile checking into. And then the other thing, Art, I just thought this is probably pertains to a lot of people. Someone asking about age discrimination. They say they're 67 and on furlough from a startup company where they've been the product manager and worked 80 hours a week. And age discrimination was huge the last time they were in the job market, and they want to know, should I state right out that I'm retired and looking to work? rather than pretending I'm ready for the 80-hour work week grind, which I'm not.
Yeah. So, those are, to me, those are not conversations you have as introductions. Um, Everyone's situation is different, and this is a real great opportunity to have a one-on-one conversation with your local career force staff person to explain the whole situation. Um, I'm not saying age discrimination is not a thing. It certainly is, and there's all sorts of discrimination in job hunting. The key is, though, don't assume it. Don't go in with that idea that this is what I'm going to experience. Because again, I have seen employers actively seeking, in fact, marketing themselves specifically to older workers. And there's a reason for that. Older workers have an enormous amount of experience. They have a work ethic that potentially, through decades of experience, has developed to a point where it allows you to compete at another level. A lot of things that I may take for granted, showing up for work on time, putting in a 40-hour week, not an 80-hour week. I don't want to put in an 80-hour week. Is not something that other workers are willing to do. It might not be that 40-hour work week you're looking for, but there are employers out there that will be very, very flexible, and they're just looking for someone to talk to, someone to have a conversation with in an interview. At that stage, they're going to see how old you are. I don't feel it's a good idea to start the conversation, because when you start the conversation with, I'm retired and I'm just looking for part-time work. Think about, in the employer's mind, the picture that paints. That means that at any point you could leave. I'm not saying that's not true, but when an employer hires someone, they invest in training them to do the job, and their expectation is that will pay off. They will find a return on investment. And if you give them any inkling that you are going to be an extremely short time employee, that's where they're going to be a little skittish. So it's not that you're older, it's that the potential, and it has happened. It's happened to me. I have trained someone in. I have had a person much older than I that I hired, and they were great for 6 months. And then as soon as I got them fully trained in, they retired. And that's their prerogative. You can certainly do that. But it made me a little weary. It made me a little weary of, oh my gosh, I just lost thousands of dollars in training. So the next time I'm looking for, that's why I ask, where do you plan on being in 3 years from now? You very well may be retired at that point. But think about how you're going to answer that question. How could you answer that question truthfully in a way that wouldn't scare an employer off? And that's where those one-on-one conversations are really, really beneficial. Just real quick, all dislocated worker counselors work on a local basis. So that's why it's really important to connect with your local career force location. There is a dislocated worker page right on careerforcemn.com that explains the process, but you do apply for it locally. So make sure you make those calls. All right, so we're going to talk about getting organized. You really want to balance your job search activities. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. In the Duluth Career Force location, I used to be the manager there. We could potentially see the same person every day for months, sitting in front of the same computer, applying for jobs day after day after day. And they would get very frustrated because it was not working for them. And in certain industries, it might not. They may not be applying for jobs that are that they have the qualifications for, because their line of work may have been so much different than what is currently available. And they weren't balancing their job search activities. They were doing just one thing. And for some people, that'll work just fine, and they'll get a job very quickly because they have marketable skills. Their skills are in demand right now. Their experience is in demand, but that doesn't work for everybody. So you want to balance between networking, between applying for jobs, maybe cold calling, or trying to get a warm introduction to an employer, doing research, filling skills gaps. There's a lot of things you can do to fill your job seeking day. Think about what is working. If it's not working, try something different. We're going to be talking about SMART goals, one of my favorite tools, in just a minute here. But keep good records throughout. You don't want to reinvent things. If you are getting, if you're applying to the same employer and aren't hearing anything, keep a file on that, and whatever works for you. Some people it's paper, some people it's a spreadsheet, some people it's a Word document. You know, how many times have you applied to that employer? When did you apply? You know, when are you going to follow up? What are you going to do differently next time you apply? Maybe you had an interview. Write your notes down on how the interview went. What questions did you stumble over? When I do an interview class, I always ask, does anyone have an interview lately? And you know, generally there'll be one or two people who raise their hand, and I'll ask, do you remember every question they asked you and every answer you gave? And in almost all cases, they say, no, I don't. I have some general idea of how it went, but I don't remember them all. Write them down. We can't improve on anything unless we know if there's an issue. And that's a great conversation to have with a job counselor, a career force location is, here's the question I stumbled on. Here's how I answered it. Can you think of a way I could better explain that situation? And then the next interview you're going to have, you're not going to stumble over that because they all ask similar questions. Maybe not the same exact questions, but you're going to run into the same types of questions over and over and over again. And then I really encourage you to take that interview class that we have in a couple of weeks where we talk about behavioral-based interview questions and those, how to handle those. Make sure you record all your contacts with companies. Have a detailed work history. I'm going to send everyone a data sheet for your job history. Make sure you get the exact dates if at all possible. And when I say if at all possible, that means don't give up after you don't get them the first time. Oh, I can't find that. Well, call a former employer. If you can't call the former employer, look at, see if you've got any old pay sheets, pay stubs. You can even pay the Internal Revenue Service to give you a listing of your job history. That does cost money. So hopefully you've exhausted all other efforts before that. But the reason this is important is some employers are very specific about the experience requirements, especially government work. Like for the state of Minnesota, if I apply for a job that requires 5 years of experience, I need to show exactly that I have at least 5 years of experience. So the years are not going to work. I can't say from 2005 to 2010 because all that guarantees is 3 years and 2 days, the end of 2005 to the beginning of 2010. So in that case, it would be very important to have the exact dates. Not all employers are like that, of course, but the more information you have, the easier it is going to be to respond to the specific requirements of a job. And then keep an updated list of username and passwords for each company's online application site. There's a lot of different ways to do that. I had to get 2 passwords back today, this morning. I know we're kind of in this password tornado of trying to keep all this organized. So whatever works for you, just make sure that you're not using the same exact credentials for your bank records as you do for online applications. You do have to use different passwords to keep yourself safe online. Oh, so let's talk a little bit about SMART goals. I use SMART goals for pretty much everything I do, whether it be work, whether it be personal things, whether it be employment. And the idea here is if you break it down into these 5 spots of this acronym, it'll really lead to more completion, more success of your goals. So if your goal every day is to get a job, think about what that does. Every day, you may think of yourself as having failed that goal. Oh, I didn't get a job today. That was my goal today. I didn't get a job. Oh, it's been going on for months. Break it down into the specific component parts. So S is specific. What exactly do you want to do? So maybe it's prepare a resume. Okay, that's a fairly big goal, but let's say prepare a resume. So is it measurable? That's the second. How will you know you're on track to complete this goal? Well, give yourself a time constraint. I'm going to give myself, I'm going to present a rough draft to a career counselor in 10 days. Now, the first step could be, I'm going to call a career counselor and say, hey, what steps do I need to make a resume? They're not going to do it for you. They'll help you with the process, but they're not going to create a resume because they don't know your work history. And they don't, there's too much there that you would have to contribute. Is it achievable? What resources will help you to complete this goal? So you can take a resume workshop, a skills assessment, get your job history together, find job descriptions of places you're interested in, find how they term the skills you have, use their terms for your skills? And then is it relevant? Why is this goal important to you? So if it's something that you're not really engaged in, do you really want to do it? Is it something that, well, Art talked about that boilers thing. Well, I have no interest in boilers, a boilers certificate. So it's not really relevant. So maybe it shouldn't be your goal. And then is it time constrained? When will you complete this? You don't want to be overly optimistic. Give yourself a legitimate time frame because we want to be successful in these goals. So don't say you're going to get a resume done tomorrow. Think about at the end of this week, I will have a rough draft put together and I will send it in for feedback. So everything you do, try to break it down into component parts. So I want to get a job. That's the overall goal. To get a job, what do I need to do? Well, I need to get a resume together. Create a SMART goal on that. I'm not saying you have to go through each of these steps on a piece of paper, but I find that if I put it through this filter, I'm more realistic about what I can done, when I can get it done, and if I should even do it. Just on the chat box, has anyone ever heard? By the way, is month and year good enough? For most employers, it is. By the way, for that question, but specifically to the state of Minnesota and other government, if you are right on the edge of their experience requirements, I would even go down to the day. I never would have said that 5 years ago, but the research I've done, the experience I've had with organizations, some of them have to be extremely careful that they hold applicants to what they say they're going to. And the reason for this is if they don't, if they let someone slide by, what happens then is people self-filter. You'll filter yourself out of an opportunity because you say, well, I only have 4 years and 11 months. Well, if the other person put the months only and they got hired, that person who self-filtered them out of that opportunity could potentially create an actionable process with that employer to say, wait a second, you said it had to be 5 years. I didn't have 5 years experience, so I didn't even apply. This person applied without 5 years experience. I know because I used to work with him and you hired him. That's why employers are extremely careful to hold themselves to what they have written down. And government employment is probably the apex of that because they're held to a higher standard. People are really going to put them under a lot of scrutiny because they're good jobs, by the way. I love working for the state. It's great employment. There are state jobs out there. State jobs and government jobs sometimes are only on the state sites. So that's, again, mixing up things. Don't just go to Indeed. Don't just go to Craigslist. Go to specific websites because sometimes that's the only place you're going to find an employer's opportunities. So if you're interested in a career with the state of Minnesota, bookmark that site. I always keep a list of bookmarked employment sites, not their web page, because then I have to click about 5 times to get to the employments, to the jobs. I go right to the jobs available or employment opportunities, and I bookmark that one, and I name it. Jobs at the state of Minnesota, jobs in St. Louis County, jobs in the city of Duluth. That way, I can click on it each and every day of my job search to see if there's anything new. And I can immediately respond because timeliness is such a huge part of job search. The perfect resume 1 day late does no one any good. So make sure that you're ready and available to respond to opportunities. And the first thing is to know what opportunities you're looking for, identifying employers that you're interested in. So that all comes with the research. When you research a company, study their products, their services, their size, their history. I really like to go to the About Us tab. Many companies, even small companies, will have a Contact Us, About Us. Click on that. They'll, in many cases, give you the history of the company, maybe their mission statement, their vision, their values. Online web presences have allowed small companies to have a lot of information online. It's really created a more even playing field. All you got to have is someone who understands the technology, and even small companies can have a robust online presence, and they're going to have a lot of information about them. And they really like to know that you've read that. They put it out there because they're proud of it and they want people to know this. And if you come into the interview and don't know that, one, you may be interviewing for a company you maybe don't share the same values with. But two, you're not going to be able to respond to questions they ask you in the way maybe you should, because you're not going to be able to infer certain things. It'll help guide your answers to questions the more you know about that company. There's all sorts of labor market information. I already talked about that at various different websites. Human resources policy can be a little trickier to locate online. That's where you can talk to people who have worked at that company. Maybe just knowing the dress code of a location would really help to see if that's a good fit for you, or determine how you're going to dress when you go to the interview. Press releases. That's another thing. Not every company has press releases, but I had a company someone was really interested in, and we Googled the name and press releases, and it had 21 years of every press release they've ever put out. So we went back 6 months, looked at every press release, and I guarantee you he had more topical information about that company than any other person who interviewed for that particular job. Now, doesn't mean he used any of it, but he was prepared in case it came up. He could reference, oh yeah, I did see that. I saw that you have a new location in Brule, hydroelectric plant. That's very interesting. It was really cool. It was really nice to know that you are going to the green initiative that you started last year. Well, it's two things he just referenced that he found through press releases. Where you can research, we talked about a lot of different things. LinkedIn, I am a believer in LinkedIn. You don't have to be on LinkedIn, but you can follow companies you're interested in on LinkedIn, and their jobs come to you. You're going to be made aware of jobs before you even look online, because you're going to get an alert potentially that a job that meets your profile at a company you follow has become available. I know we're running a little short on time here. Some networking cards, not something you have to have, but it's a good takeaway. Don't white out your former business card. I know we don't use business cards as much as we used to. But in some industries, especially sales, they're still relevant, and you can find information on that online. And there are some really cheap alternatives for getting those. Some people even do it themselves. Next week, I'll be talking extensively about portfolios. It's just information you bring to an interview, copies of your resume, maybe some work samples, your reference sheet, and maybe even a letter of recommendation. It's something that's a takeaway for employers that can really leave a really well-organized impression of you for them as you leave. Speaking of references, make sure that you're choosing your references at the beginning of your job search. You may not use the same references for every job. I mean, determine their value towards the type of work you're going for, but bring them into your job search now. Let them know. I mean, if these are people you know, like, and trust, and know your skills, which they should be if they're your reference, make sure that you reconnect with them. Let them know that you're in the job hunt. They may help you find the next job. Have them take a look at your resume. Maybe do a resume review for you. Now they're going to know what you've been up to. Let them know if you've got an interview coming up. Ask them if they can write a letter of recommendation potentially for you. I'm not saying you're going to totally overwhelm them, but don't wait till the end. Don't wait till everything's been done and then, oh yeah, they're going to check references. They have a lot more value potentially towards your job search if you bring them in earlier. And even if they say no, thank them. Thank them. Leave them with an impression that you are moving in a new direction, your career is advancing, you are someone that still remembers who they are and is still a networking possibility for them. All right. So any questions that we can hit in the last minute here, Sheila, before we wrap it up for the day?
There's really only one. Back when you were talking about age and presenting yourself in the interview, someone wanted to know what's a good answer to the question, where do you see yourself in 3 years?
So in that case, again, it's very specific to your situation. If you are literally going to retire in a couple months, look at contract work, look at staffing agencies, look at that short-term possibility where they're only engaging and specifically for short-term. If it is something where you're thinking of 1 or 2 years and 3 years is what they ask, you say, I'm not exactly sure where I'll be in 1 or 2 years, but I guarantee you I keep such good records that if I were to leave this opportunity, the next person could jump right in and with a minimal amount of training because they keep excellent records. I'm not saying that's the greatest answer, but that's an example that I've seen used in the past. That would be very specific to your situation. So again, reach out. There are appointments. I think there's like 600 appointments available currently this week statewide. Those are very underutilized, and you can generally find an opportunity within your area to connect with someone and have that conversation for a half an hour, and you come up with a really good plan. And it doesn't have to end there. It could be the start of a relationship that maybe develops to a resume review or interview prep, or maybe helping you with finding some jobs in your area. All right, with that, we are going to send a recording of this out. It takes a little bit to download it, edit it, and upload it to YouTube. So by the end of the day tomorrow, you should have that. Thank you, Sheila. Appreciate your time. Always great to work with you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I hope everyone got a nugget or two, and best of luck in your job search.
Bye. Have a good day, everyone.